Hey there everyone, welcome back to another perfect pairing with me. As the seasons and holidays change, so can the mood of your handmade cards. In this card making tutorial, I'll share some of my favorite techniques in creating some moody floral designs. Before we get into today's project, make sure you subscribe to the Altenew channel for more card making and paper crafting tutorials. My Perfect Pairings with Jaycee series explores crafting techniques that effortlessly blend sure-to-love new releases and well-loved Altenew favorites. If you love these kinds of crafty tutorials, hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of my videos airing on the 2nd and 4th Sunday. For my perfect pairing, the first two things I'm grabbing are Eucalyptus Wreath, the coordinating stencil, and its hot foil plate. I want to get my background going so I have a better idea of where I want to place flowers for this arrangement, but the background cardstock I'm working with first is Moon Rock. I'm just looking for a medium to dark gray background. And instead of foiling on gold, I thought this bronze copper would suit my scene a little bit more. To me, this copper color just feels a little bit more like a change of seasons and the transition into fall and winter. I'm running a little bit of the Altenew glue tape on the back side of my Moon Rock panel. And this is how I'm holding my foil to the cardstock. And we'll see how this arrangement looks when I run it through my hot foil machine. If you don't have the Eucalyptus Wreath hot foil set, what I also recommend is using this piece, this die right here from the Fresh Flowers die set, and this will be part of this perfect pairing. And to use the foliage element in this die set to cut brushed copper cardstock from Altenew, and that'll work just as beautifully in your perfect pairing if you decide to recreate this card. But for my example, I'm going to reveal this copper foil and Eucalyptus Wreath. And I love this end result. I did get some overfoiling, and what I find is useful to removing that is using the stamp conditioning eraser set. I have the old one and the new one, but either way, just gently rubbing the eraser over these overfoiled areas just really helps it come right off. And once I've got the majority of the big pieces off, I'll show you how to salvage some of these smaller areas with a technique that you all know I love. But I'm going to take this background just one step further and use the coordinating Eucalyptus Wreath simple coloring stencil to add a little bit of depth to the eucalyptus leaves in this background. I'm getting out my Altenew 9x12 sticky matte grid, and I'm using it to hold down my background panel. Then I can align my stencil to the openings of the foil outline. Since I'm using Moon Rock cardstock, I'll go down a step in darkness with Lava Rock, and this is all from the same color family. And I'm using a mini ink blending tool to add a little bit of depth between all of these leaves. And I'm using Lava Rock to create a variety of gradients within the eucalyptus arrangement. So that's part of the arrangement. And then there's another opening in the stencil, and I'll fill that in with Lava Rock as well. So that's the background panel to my card. Again, I'm using Moon Rock cardstock, Lava Rock ink, and the Eucalyptus Wreath hot foil plate with its coordinating stencil. I'm going to set my background panel aside and start working on my foreground elements. And I'm going to leave my 9x12 sticky matte grid since I'll be ink blending on some die cuts. So like I showed earlier, this is the Fresh Flowers die set. This was part of the May 2024 Secret Garden retreat. And in my class of that retreat, I actually used pieces of this die set to create a card using techniques I've never really focused on the Altenew channel before. And of course, the Altenew retreats are always such a great time. So if you haven't had a chance to check one out, please do so. But anyway, in this card, I'm going to be focusing on just a few dies again in this set. I want just the rose looking elements included in the die set, so that's this larger keyhole opening and the more elongated triangle in here. And of course I will also cut the centers to the flowers and then this set of leaves here. And I'll show you which cardstocks go with which dies. For the flower petal layers, I'm using Pastel Sunrise. And I'll use Pastel Sunrise to cut both of these groupings of dies. Then for the cluster of leaves and the flower centers, I'll use Sicilian Amber cardstock. I think the tone of Sicilian Amber sort of matches the copper feeling of the Eucalyptus Wreath. So if you're recreating this card in another palette, I would just suggest using a foil that coordinates with your cardstock or vice versa. On my Pastel Sunrise petals, I'm going to use Woodland Escape Fresh Dye inks with just a touch of dried petals. So I have mauve and toasted mauve to use on both of these flowers. On my keyhole images, I'll start with a base of mauve and another mini ink blending tool. And I'm creating long gradients of mauve starting from the center of the flower towards the tips of the petals. Then I'll create a shallower gradient of toasted mauve, concentrating this color in the center and working my way out, making sure that mauve is still peeking through the color that we just ink blended earlier. Then I'll add just a touch of redwood to the center of each of the images to create a lot of depth in the center of the flower. And I think this will create some really interesting contrast between our background and our focal flowers. Then on the elongated triangle cutouts, I'll start with Dusty Rose. And just like the first flower, I'm repeating the elongated gradients from the center of the flower to the tips of the petals. Then instead of toasted mauve, I'm going to go straight to redwood, and so that I can still create some really interesting contrast between Dusty Rose, redwood, and our background, and to distinguish it between this top flower and now our newly created bottom petals. I'll let my die cut petals dry off to the side before I start gluing anything down, and really I'm not ready to glue anything down yet because I've got to do the flower centers. For the large keyhole image and the elongated triangle, I need these two centers. I'm not ink blending on these two shapes because they're really made for the alignment piece. But then I will need all of my foliage elements cut from Sicilian Amber. And I want to create a mix of jewel tone gradients in all of the leaves just so that there's variation in the bouquet, just like how the leaves transition in autumn. So for my two leaf sets, I'll separate them just kind of at random, like that. On these top leaves, I'll use Olaf and Toasted Mauve. And on the bottom leaves, I'll use Mahogany Bark and Redwood. Starting with my lightest ink first on these top sets of leaves, this is Olaf. And I'm creating a gradient from the base of the leaf to the tip, just like that. Works up really easily. Then I'll add a shallow gradient of Toasted Mauve at the base of the leaf. Then on these bottom three leaves, I'll use Mahogany Bark to add a red gradient to Sicilian Amber cardstock. Then I'll deepen that with Redwood. I have a dwarf burning bush in my garden, and this palette right here reminds me of what they currently look like right now. Then on the flower center layers, I'm applying kind of whatever's left on the brush just to the edges of the die cut, just for a little bit of interest. Then after setting aside all of the foliage elements that I just ink blended, I can start assembling my petals now that I think that they're dry. So again, on top, this is the keyhole opening. On the bottom is the elongated triangle. I will also need the alignment keyhole, the elongated triangle opening, and these help align the ink blended centers that we made earlier. Then I'm just going to follow the layering guide found on the back of the die set packaging. And here are my two assembled flower images. By now I hope you can see that it's really easy to create some fall palettes that aren't so dark. It's really about using your color palettes wisely and knowing where and when to add a little pop of bright color so that your fall and winter bouquets still look really vibrant and lifelike. I'll set these two images aside. Before I start gluing down my foreground flowers to my background, I decided to pick my sentiment first. This is the Scripty Sentiments Die Set. This was also part of the May 2024 Secret Garden release. Almost jumped ahead to 2025. But anyway, I cut just the hello sentiment, the offset shadow, and the sentiment itself. So I cut the sentiment from Moonrock cardstock, the same color as the background panel. And then I cut the offset layer from brushed copper cardstock. This is from Altenew. I thought it was a close enough match to the foil that I have in my stash. I cut 3 layers of the Hello Sentiment from Moonrock cardstock, and I've already stacked them. So now all I have to do is glue it down to my offset layer. And off to the side, I'll let this dry under an acrylic block just to give it some weight. I've already glued down my foiled background to a folded note card base. I'll start with the placement of my flower elements and placing my flowers along this branch. I just think it makes the most sense for these images to lie along the shape of the wreath. Then I can nestle and frame my flowers with the ink blended foliage. And I'm making sure to mix and match my more green foliage with a little bit of the red mix. And I think this space right here is appropriate for my sentiment. But before I do that, in order to hide some of the small bits of overfoiling that I have on my panel, I'll use the metallic watercolor pan set and the copper metallic color, since it matches the brushed copper cardstock. And I'll use copper metallic watercolor to add splatter throughout the whole arrangement. Then after foam mounting the sentiment, that finishes this card featuring a few techniques for using your Altenew florals in more of your holiday themed cards. My series encourages you to shop your existing Altenew stash and rekindle their love with newer releases. Perfect Pairings with Jaycee airs on the Altenew channel every second and fourth Sunday of the month. Please make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for tuning in to this perfect pairing episode with me, and I'll see you in the next one.
Hello there! Did that video just spark your creativity? And do you want more project ideas and inspiration videos too? Well, if you do, please make sure that you subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, make sure that you do click that notification bell so you don't miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye bye!